Chapter 4. The Vomiting Swarm and the Invisible Sting. The oppressive stillness of Dream Halfway Tree shattered with a grotesque, wet heave from the Candyman. His decaying head snapped back, and a torrent of black bees erupted from his mouth, a living, buzzing vomit of insects that spilled into the already terror-filled air. More followed in sickening waves, spewing from his ears, nostrils, and the hollow sockets of his eyes, a horrifying, writhing fountain of stinging death. The dreamers recoiled, their silent screams reaching a fever pitch. A young woman, her face a mask of utter despair, opened her mouth to beg for mercy, but a thick stream of bees shot directly into her throat. Her body spasmed violently, arching backward before exploding outwards in a shower of crimson dream blood and unrecognizable fragments, leaving nothing but a sticky, red mist. A young man, paralyzed by terror, could only watch as a writhing mass of bees poured from the Candyman's ear and directly into his open mouth. His body began to inflate grotesquely, his skin stretching taut before he too detonated in a shower of blood and pulverized flesh. As this horrifying spectacle unfolded, another wave of the Candyman's vomited swarm descended upon other dreamers. A young couple, clinging to each other, suddenly began to convulse. Invisible pricks marked their skin, swelling into angry welts that oozed a dark, viscous fluid. Their dream bodies spasmed violently, as if an unseen force was tearing them apart from the inside. God's Voice 99, witnessing this through his strained mental barrier, felt a fresh wave of nausea. The Candyman flickered in and out of his vision, a nightmarish specter spewing forth this buzzing plague. He maintained his white light, but its intensity wavered against the sheer horror. A burly young man swatted frantically at the air, his face contorted in silent agony. Though no bees seemed to touch him, welts erupted across his skin, and he clawed at his chest as if his lungs were collapsing. He crumpled to the ground, his eyes wide with an unseen torment. The Candyman, his head still twitching with the expulsion of the insects, watched with a chillingly detached amusement. The air thrummed with the buzzing of thousands of wings, a symphony of impending death. Some dreamers were exploding from within, while others were being ravaged by an invisible, stinging force, their bodies writhing and swelling in grotesque ways. The vibrant, twisted landscape of Dream Halfway Tree was now a buzzing, bloody charnel house, and God's Voice 99 was trapped, forced to witness the Candyman's horrifying power unleashed in its most visceral and terrifying form. The instructor remained a silent, radiant observer, his malevolent game reaching a new level of brutal intensity. The Candyman, a hulking figure wreathed in the low hum of unseen bees, moved with a terrifying grace. His rusty hook shot out and snagged a young man through the chest. The force of the impalement lifted the screaming figure into the air, his body dangling above the Candyman's head like a grotesque trophy, crimson dream blood raining down onto the decaying face below. Nearby, a young woman witnessed this horrific spectacle, her eyes widening in primal terror as she clamped her trembling hands over her mouth and nose, her silent screams muffled against her own flesh. But the Candyman seemed to anticipate her futile attempt at defense. With a subtle tilt of his decaying head, he directed a concentrated swarm towards her. The black cloud of bees pressed against her hands, their tiny stingers piercing through her skin as if it were paper. Her muffled cries intensified as the insects forced their way into her mouth and nostrils, their buzzing now echoing from within her skull. Her body began to twitch uncontrollably, and then, with a sickening, wet implosion, her head burst like an overripe fruit, spraying the dreamscape with brain matter and crimson dream blood. Her headless body crumpled to the ground, limbs flailing in a final, grotesque dance. Nearby, another young man, his face a mask of sheer panic, made a desperate dash towards the distorted silhouette of the clock tower, hoping for some illusory sanctuary. But the Candyman merely flicked his wrist, and a focused stream of bees shot towards the fleeing figure. The swarm enveloped his head, forcing their way into his mouth and down his throat. His body went rigid for a horrifying moment, then with a violent, internal detonation, his torso exploded upwards, propelled by the force of the bursting insects within. His legs remained standing for a gruesome, split second, severed at the waist, before collapsing into the bloody ruin that was once his upper body. The buzzing intensified, a chaotic symphony of death. One young man's skin began to bubble and blister as if he were being burned from the inside out by the venom. Another's eyes swelled to grotesque proportions before bursting in a shower of viscous fluid. A young woman's limbs twisted and snapped with sickening cracks, her body contorting into an impossible shape as if an unseen force was determined to break every bone in her body. The Candyman watched, a silent conductor orchestrating this gruesome ballet of death, his flickering form a constant reminder of the nightmare they were trapped within. God's Voice 99's white light pulsed erratically, struggling against the overwhelming darkness and the sheer brutality of the Candyman's power. The dream of Halfway Tree was now a landscape of unimaginable horror, painted in crimson and buzzing with the sound of souls being torn apart. The instructor remained a silent, radiant overseer, the game reaching its bloody, terrifying climax. The Candyman, his attention sweeping across the mangled remains of his victims, then tilted his head, his gaze settling on the impaled figure still twitching above him. A low, guttural chuckle rumbled in his chest, a sound like the buzzing of 1,000 contented bees. With a subtle gesture of his hooked hand, he directed the remaining swarm upwards. The black cloud of insects descended upon the impaled man, enveloping his screaming form. The buzzing intensified to a frenzied pitch, a horrifying sound of ravenous consumption. The dreamers who were still alive in this nightmare were forced to witness the grotesque spectacle as the bees began to devour the impaled man alive. His silent screams intensified, his body spasming violently as the swarm burrowed into his flesh, tearing and consuming with horrifying speed. In mere moments, the once whole body began to disintegrate. Chunks of dream flesh were torn away, revealing glistening, unreal bone beneath. Crimson dream blood rained down in an even thicker torrent, mixed with the black bodies of the gorging bees. Within what felt like an eternity of silent agony, the impaled figure was reduced to nothing but a skeletal frame, picked clean by the relentless swarm. Then, even the bones began to dissolve, the buzzing finally subsiding as the last of the bees dispersed, leaving the hook hanging empty above the Candyman's head. Throughout this unfolding horror, God's Voice 99 witnessed the carnage through a disorienting lens. The Candyman's form flickered erratically, one moment a solid figure of nightmare, the next a shimmering distortion at the edge of his vision. The swarm of bees, too, seemed to phase in and out of reality, their buzzing a fluctuating drone that sometimes intensified to an unbearable shriek and then faded into near silence. The dream of Halfway Tree was now an utterly desolate tableau of mangled bodies and lingering dread, the empty hook a stark reminder of the utter annihilation that awaited them. The instructor remained a silent, radiant overseer, the game continuing its bloody, inexorable course in the humid Jamaican dreamscape as the Candyman and his deadly swarm flickered in and out of God's Voice 99's perception, a terrifying instability at the heart of this living nightmare. End of chapter. Subscribe for more. And don't forget to like and share.